My ex said he forgave me. But 3 years later, he told my fiancé why we really got divorced. Yeah, that's my life right now. Completely shattered because my past decided to show up uninvited. I'm Jesse, 30 years old, and what I thought was behind me just exploded in my face. It all started back in college. I was working at this local bistro called Harvest Table to pay for school when Harold started. He was this tall, super focused business major who got hired as a server too. We hit it off right away. He wasn't like other guys who just wanted to hook up. Harold actually listened when I talked, remembered my coffee order, and covered my shifts when I had big exams. After 3 months of this back and forth flirting thing, he finally asked me out. We were together for 7 years total. The first few years were honestly great. We moved in together after graduation, got decent starter jobs, and had this cute little apartment that we slowly filled with IKEA furniture we assembled ourselves. Looking back, those were probably our best days. Just figuring life out together, splitting cheap bottles of wine on Friday nights, dreaming about the future. When he proposed after dating for 4 years, I said yes without even thinking. Obviously, I would marry him. We had a small wedding since we were both still paying off student loans, but it was perfect for us. My parents absolutely adored Harold. My dad would constantly tell me how lucky I was to find such a solid guy. And I knew it too, at least at first. About 2 years into our marriage is when things started to change. Harold got promoted at work, which meant longer hours and more responsibility. I was stuck in the same position at my company, feeling like I was watching him move forward while I stayed still. That's when I reconnected with Alex, a guy from my marketing class in college, who reached out on Facebook. It started innocent enough, just catching up over coffee when he was in town for business. But then the texts started getting more frequent and the conversations deeper. Alex made me feel seen in a way I hadn't with Harold in months. He complimented me, asked about my dreams, and didn't seem exhausted every time I wanted to talk. I started looking forward to his messages more than coming home to my husband. I didn't plan for it to become physical, but it did. One night, when Harold was on a business trip, Alex came over. I told myself it would just be drinks, just catching up, but we both knew what was happening. The affair lasted about 2 months before Harold found out. He wasn't even supposed to be home that afternoon. But he surprised me by coming back early from a conference. My phone was on the kitchen counter while I was in the shower, and a text from Alex popped up that made everything clear. The confrontation was awful. Harold had screenshots of messages, timestamps of calls. He'd been collecting evidence for at least a week before saying anything. I couldn't deny it, so I confessed to everything. I'd never seen him cry before that day. His face just crumbled. And this man who always knew what to say couldn't even form sentences. Somehow, despite all that, Harold said he wanted to try and make it work. I was shocked. Part of me had been preparing for him to kick me out. We agreed to go to marriage counseling. I deleted Alex's number, blocked him on all social media, and gave Harold complete access to my phone. We read relationship books together on Sunday mornings, had weekly check-ins about our feelings, the whole thing. His parents knew what happened, but we kept it from my family. I couldn't bear for them to know what I'd done. For a while, it seemed like we were actually healing. Harold would still get this distant look sometimes, but overall, he was trying. We were trying. After about 6 months, he said he forgave me. That he wanted to move forward and not keep bringing up the past. I was so relieved. I thought we had survived the worst thing that could happen to our marriage. I had no idea that was just the beginning of the end. About 8 months after everything with Alex, I got a call that my grandmother had passed away. The funeral was going to be in my hometown, about 5 hours away. Harold was swamped at work with this huge client project, so we agreed he would stay behind while I went to the funeral alone. The services were scheduled for Thursday and Friday, and since my parents and brother had moved away years ago, I planned to stay with my high school friend, Megan. The funeral was draining. I'd been close with my grandmother, and seeing all those relatives with their fake sympathy made everything worse. "She's in a better place," they kept saying, as if that helped anything. Thursday night, I was emotionally exhausted and just crashed at Megan's place. But by Friday evening, after the reception, I was feeling restless. All these emotions were swirling around, and I just needed to not think about death for a while. When some old friends from high school texted about meeting up at this local bar we used to sneak into as teenagers, it seemed like exactly what I needed. I told Megan I was going out for a bit. I texted Harold that I was emotionally drained and going to bed early, which wasn't completely a lie. I was drained, just not going to bed. I deliberately left my phone charging at Megan's. I told myself it was because I didn't want to worry about losing it. But honestly, I knew Harold sometimes checked my location. The bar was packed with weekend crowds, and it felt like stepping back in time. That's when I ran into Trevor, my high school boyfriend. We dated senior year before breaking up when we went to different colleges. He looked good, like, really good. He'd become a personal trainer, and it showed. We started talking, catching up on the last decade of our lives. The drinks kept coming, and the conversation got flirtier. I kept telling myself it was harmless, just blowing off steam after an emotional couple of days. One drink turned into several, and several turned into leaving together. We didn't go far. Just to his car in the parking lot. We didn't have sex, but we definitely crossed lines that a married woman shouldn't cross. It was stupid and reckless. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking about Harold or our marriage or the counseling or any of it. I was just thinking about feeling something, anything, other than grief and the constant guilt that had followed me since the thing with Alex. I crashed at Trevor's apartment and took an Uber back to Megan's the next morning. When I walked in, I could tell something was wrong. Megan had this look on her face, part disappointment, part concern. She asked where I'd been all night, and I made up some story about running into friends and crashing on the couch. I don't think she believed me, but she didn't push it. I showered, packed my stuff, and texted Harold that I was heading home. The whole drive back, I practiced compartmentalizing. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had convinced myself it wasn't a big deal. Just a one-time thing that didn't need to be mentioned. Harold and I were in a good place, finally. Why rock the boat? When I walked through the door, Harold was sitting at the kitchen table. No welcome home hug. No how was the funeral? Just this cold, empty stare that made my stomach drop. He knew. Somehow, he knew. How was your night? Harold asked, his voice eerily calm. I tried to play it casual, saying the funeral was tough, but I got through it. He didn't blink, just slid his phone across the table. There was a Facebook message open from Megan to Harold. My heart sank as I read it. She wrote that she couldn't live with herself if she didn't say something. She told him I'd gone out Friday night and never came back until morning. That she had seen my phone sitting there all night with his text about going to bed early still on the screen. I thought we could work through this, Harold said quietly. I need to know exactly what happened last night. For a split second, I considered denying everything, but the evidence was right there. So, I told him a version of the truth. Yes, I went out with old friends. Yes, I ran into Trevor. Yes, I spent time with him. But no, we didn't have sex. I minimized what actually happened, making it sound like just a drunken conversation and maybe some flirting. Nothing physical. Nothing serious. I'll forgive you, Harold said, and relief washed over me, until he continued. I just need to know everything. Like last time. Full disclosure. Then we can move forward. I should have known it was a trap. I shared a few more details, still downplaying everything, insisting nothing really happened. That's when Harold's composure finally broke. You're still lying, he said, his voice cracking. I know you didn't sleep on any friend's couch. Megan already told me you came back in the same clothes, obviously having spent the night somewhere else. Before I could respond, Harold stood up, grabbed a small overnight bag I hadn't even noticed by the door, and said, I'm staying at my parents' tonight. I need space to think. I spent that night alone in our apartment, calling and texting him. No response. The next morning, I went to work like normal, still hoping we could talk this through, when emotions weren't so high. When I came home that evening, something felt off. It took me a minute to realize what it was. Harold's laptop wasn't on the desk. His favorite coffee mug wasn't on the drying rack. I rushed to our bedroom and yanked open his dresser drawers. Empty. In a panic, I called his parents. His mom answered, her voice cold as she said, "Harold doesn't want to speak with you right now. Please respect that." Before I could protest, she hung up. I found out later that while I was at work, Harold's dad had paid our landlord to terminate our lease early. Harold and his father had come with some friends and moved all of his belongings out. He'd left my stuff untouched, but everything that was his was gone. He had even divided our shared belongings with precision, taken exactly half of our kitchen utensils, half of our towels. It was like he'd surgically removed himself from our life. 3 days later, I received divorce papers. The Harold I knew, the one who'd fought for our marriage after Alex, who'd gone to counseling and read books and practiced forgiveness, that Harold was gone. In his place was the efficient stranger who wanted nothing more than to erase me from his life as quickly and cleanly as possible. The divorce took 7 months to finalize. 7 months of me trying to reach out, trying to explain, trying to apologize. 7 months of lawyers' offices and mediation rooms and Harold barely looking at me. His attorney was a friend of his family who took the case as a favor. Mine was expensive and kept telling me that since there were no kids or significant assets, fighting would only waste money. When it was finally over, I felt hollow. Our marriage had ended not with some dramatic final confrontation, but with paperwork and signatures. Harold never raised his voice, never called me names. His silence was so much worse than any anger could have been. I spent the next year trying to rebuild my life. I moved to a smaller apartment across town, threw myself into my job, and slowly started going out again. My friends divided themselves pretty cleanly. Mutual friends mostly sided with Harold, which I guess I understand. I was labeled as the cheater, the villain in our story. But I was determined to move forward. To become someone better than the person who had ruined her marriage. That's when I met John. He came into the coffee shop where I'd become a regular, spilled his latte all over my laptop, and spent the next hour helping me salvage what files we could. He was different from Harold, more easygoing, always ready with a joke. The kind of guy who makes friends with baristas and remembers their names. We exchanged numbers so he could send me recommendations for data recovery services, and within a week we were texting daily. Dating after divorce is weird. You carry all this baggage, all these lessons about what went wrong, but you're trying not to dump it on this new person. With John, I was determined to do things differently. I was honest from the start. Yes, I'd been married. Yes, it ended badly. No, I didn't want to talk about the details. He respected that boundary. Never pushed for the full story. Our relationship moved quickly. Within 6 months, we were practically living together at his place. By our 1-year anniversary, we were house hunting. John was successful in real estate development, ready to settle down, and I was ready to prove to myself that I could be the partner I'd failed to be with Harold. When John proposed at his family's lake house last month, I cried happy tears. The ring was beautiful, not too flashy, exactly what I would have picked. His parents were thrilled, already talking about venue options and guest lists. My parents were cautiously happy for me, still wounded from how things had ended with Harold, whom they'd truly loved as a son. We decided on a relatively short engagement, a spring wedding next year. Just last week, we met with a wedding planner who helped us secure our dream venue. Everything was falling into place. I was finally getting my second chance. The past was behind me, and the future looked bright. Until yesterday. John came home late from work, his face unreadable. He set his laptop on the kitchen counter and asked me to sit down. My first thought was health news. Someone was sick. Maybe his mom or dad. Instead, he pulled up Facebook and turned the screen toward me. There was a message thread between John and Harold. My heart stopped. The message was dated 2 days ago. John had reached out first. "You don't know me, but I'm engaged to Jessie. I know this is probably crazy, but I was hoping you might tell me why you two got divorced. She doesn't talk about it much. Harold's response was below. I'm not sure what Jessie has told you, but we divorced because she cheated on me, twice. The first time I tried to forgive her. We went to counseling, worked on rebuilding trust. The second time was when she was away for a funeral and spent the night with an ex-boyfriend. I have evidence if you want to see it, but I understand if you'd rather not. John had replied simply, "Thank you for your honesty." I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. John had gone behind my back to contact my ex-husband. Harold had just offered up the worst moments of my life to a stranger. The room seemed to spin as John asked quietly, "Is it true?" I went with, "It's complicated," trying to buy time while my mind raced. John just waited, his eyes never leaving my face. Finally, I admitted that yes, there had been infidelity in my marriage. But it was a long time ago. I was a different person now. I'd grown, learned from my mistakes. The relationship had been falling apart anyway. Harold worked too much, didn't prioritize me, didn't understand me. I threw out every justification I could think of. John listened silently, then closed his laptop. "I need some time to process this," he said. He packed a bag while I begged him to stay, to talk it through, but his mind was made up. He was going to his parents for a few days to reevaluate things. Those words sent ice through my veins. They were exactly what Harold had said before he disappeared from my life. After John left, I sat in our kitchen, staring at his laptop. I reread the messages between them, fixating on Harold's casual offer of evidence. What evidence could he possibly still have after 3 years? And why would he keep it? Was he just waiting for a chance to ruin my life again? I was furious. Harold had no right to insert himself into my new relationship. He had moved on. Last I heard through mutual friends, he'd relocated to another state for a job. Why couldn't he just let me be happy? Why drag up ancient history? Before I could think better of it, I was dialing his number. I was shocked when he actually answered. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, not bothering with a greeting. "Why are you trying to ruin my future?" Harold was annoyingly calm. "I'm not trying to ruin anything, Jessie. Your fiancé asked me a direct question, and I gave him an honest answer. You had no right to tell him those things." I shouted. "That was between us. Our past is our business." "Actually," Harold replied, his voice still even, "it became John's business when you agreed to marry him without telling him the truth about yourself. He deserved to know who he was really committing to." "I'm not that person anymore," I insisted, tears streaming down my face. "I've changed. I've been in therapy. I've worked on myself." "Maybe you have," Harold said. "But that doesn't erase what happened. And it doesn't mean John doesn't deserve honesty." "You're still punishing me after all this time," I accused. "You never really forgave me." There was a long pause before Harold responded. "I did forgive you, Jessie. The first time. That's why the second time hurt so much more. But this isn't about punishment. It's about truth." John asked, and I answered. "What happens now is between you two." After we hung up, I tried calling John. Straight to voicemail. Texted him. No response. Called his parents' house. His mom answered, said he wasn't available, her voice tight with forced politeness. The parallel to what happened with Harold was too obvious to ignore. I spent that night pacing our house, alternating between fury at Harold for interfering and desperation about losing John. By morning, I'd convinced myself that this was just a bump in the road. John loved me. He'd be angry for a few days, but we'd work through it. We had too much invested in each other, in our future together, to throw it all away over my past mistakes. But days turned into a week with minimal contact. The few texts John sent were purely practical. He was stopping by to pick up work documents while I was at the office, or asking if I'd seen his passport. Nothing about us. Nothing about coming home. Finally, after 8 excruciating days, John called and asked to meet at a neutral location, the park near our house. My heart lifted. This had to be good news. He wouldn't ask to meet in person just to end things, right? I arrived early, sat on our usual bench, The spring sun warm on my face. When John approached, I could tell immediately from his expression that this wasn't going to be the reconciliation I'd hoped for. He sat beside me, leaving more space between us than normal. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, staring out at the duck pond rather than at me, "and talking to my parents, my sister, my best friend. Even saw a therapist for a session." I waited, heart pounding, as he continued. "The thing is, Jesse, it's not even really about what you did in your marriage. People make mistakes. But it's the fact that you hid it from me. We've been together for almost 2 years, talking about building a life together, and you never thought I deserved to know this huge thing about your past. I was afraid," I admitted. "Afraid you'd look at me differently. That you wouldn't understand. It was a different time in my life." John finally turned to me, his eyes sad but resolved. "But don't you see? By not telling me, you took away my chance to understand. You made that decision for both of us. And now I have to wonder what else you might decide I don't need to know." He reached into his pocket and pulled out my engagement ring. I hadn't even noticed it was missing from my jewelry box. "I'm sorry, Jesse. I can't do this," I begged. I pleaded. I promised complete honesty from that moment forward. But John's mind was made up. Trust, once broken, was nearly impossible for him to rebuild. He had watched his mother stay with his cheating father. Had seen how it slowly poisoned their relationship. He wouldn't do that to himself. As John walked away, leaving me sobbing on that bench, I realized the true cost of my actions. It wasn't just my marriage to Harold I destroyed. It was my chance at happiness with John. It was the future we'd planned together. All gone, because of choices I'd made years ago. Choices I tried to bury instead of own. The days that followed were a blur of logistics. John moved those things out while I was at work. Friends, who'd become our friends, slowly stopped including me in plans. The wedding planner called about the non-refundable deposit we'd put down. John had already contacted her to cancel everything. Social media became a minefield. I hadn't changed my relationship status yet, couldn't bear to make it official, but mutual friends started posting photos of gatherings at our favorite bar. Gatherings I hadn't been invited to. With John clearly present. I tried not to obsessively check his profile. But of course, I did. Torturing myself with glimpses of his life continuing without me. 2 weeks after our breakup, I received a package. Inside was a thumb drive with a simple note: "Since you accused me of making things up, here is the evidence I offered John." He declined to see it. Maybe you should. It was unsigned, but obviously from Harold. Against my better judgment, I plugged it in. There were folders, neatly labeled. One with screenshots of my messages with Alex from years ago. One with Megan's original message to Harold about the night of the funeral. One with what appeared to be location data from my phone showing I'd disabled tracking that night. The final folder contained a single video file. Security camera footage from the bar parking lot, showing me and Trevor stumbling to his car. Clearly about to hook up. I didn't even know such footage existed. How had Harold gotten this? Had he been collecting evidence all this time, just waiting to use it against me? The reality hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about Harold being vindictive. This was about me never facing the full consequences of my actions. I'd built my new life on the foundation of a sanitized past, one where I was more victim than perpetrator. And now that foundation had crumbled. A month has passed since then. John has already put our house on the market. He works in real estate, after all, and knows how to move property quickly. I'm staying with a college friend until I can find my own place. Sleeping on her couch. Trying not to overstay my welcome. My parents keep asking what happened. Why the wedding is off. But I can't bring myself to tell them the full truth. They'd only blame me, like everyone else. Yesterday, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw it. A photo of Harold with a woman I didn't recognize. They were hiking somewhere beautiful, mountain views behind them, both smiling widely. The caption mentioned it was their 1-year anniversary trip. 1 year he'd been with her while I was with John, building his new life while I thought I was building mine. The worst part was seeing the comments below. Mutual friends we once shared congratulating them, saying what a perfect couple they were. How happy they looked together. These same friends who had pulled away from me after our divorce. Harold had moved on completely, while I was right back at square one. Last night, I finally broke down and called my therapist for an emergency session. I sobbed in her office, raging about how unfair it all was. How Harold got to be happy while I was miserable. How one mistake, okay, 2 mistakes, from years ago was still ruining my life. She listened patiently, then asked a question that stopped me cold. Do you really believe you've taken full responsibility for your choices? I started to say yes. Of course I had. But the words died in my throat. Had I? Or had I spent the last 3 years telling myself a story where I was more wrong than wrong? Where Harold's abandonment justified my betrayals? Where I was the victim of circumstance rather than the author of my own misfortune? For the first time, sitting in that therapist's office, I truly faced what I'd done. Not just to Harold, but to myself. To John. I'd never fully owned up to my actions. Never truly apologized without qualification or excuse. I'd been so focused on moving forward that I never properly acknowledged the pain I'd left in my wake. It doesn't change anything. This realization. John isn't coming back. My reputation among our social circle is shattered. Harold has built a new life without me. But maybe, just maybe, if I can finally be honest with myself about who I've been, I have a chance to become someone different. Someone better. My ex said he forgave me. But 3 years later, he told my fiancé why we really got divorced. And in doing so, he forced me to face a truth I'd been running from for years, that forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. And that the past doesn't stay buried just because we wish it would.